The Industrial Revolution is one of the most important events in human history. Before it, most people lived on farms. They made their own clothes. Most goods were produced by hand. Travel was slow, communication was limited, and for hundreds of years, life didn't change all that much. Then, in the late 1700s, everything changed. Factories appeared, cities exploded in size. New inventions transformed transportation, and the modern world began to take shape. So, what exactly was the Industrial Revolution? Why did it start? And why do your history teachers insist on talking about it? Here's the Industrial Revolution explained in under 10 minutes by the 10-Minute Mentor. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain around 1760 and lasted until the mid-1800s. The first question students are usually asked is, why Britain? Well, Britain was in a pretty unique position. For starters, it had enormous amounts of coal and iron. And at the time, these resources were like gold. Coal powered steam engines, iron was used to build machines, factories, and eventually railroads. Britain also had a massive overseas empire. That meant easy access to raw materials like cotton and millions of customers around the world who would buy British goods. On top of that, Britain had a stable government and a strong banking system. People were willing to take risks. If someone came up with a new invention, there was a real chance investors would fund it and businesses would actually use it. But perhaps the most important factor was what was happening on Britain's farms. In the years before the Industrial Revolution, farming became much more efficient. New machines and techniques allowed farmers to grow more food with fewer workers. And while that was great for food production, it left millions of people looking for jobs. Luckily for them, factories were popping up everywhere. Britain had the resources. It had the money. It had the customers. And now it had a huge workforce. It was the perfect recipe for the Industrial Revolution. And once it started, there was no going back. Before the Industrial Revolution, most products were made by hand, at home. This was called the cottage industry. If your family needed clothes, someone spun thread. Someone wove fabric. Someone sewed it together. Everything took time. A shirt wasn't something you could just buy at the mall. It was something somebody spent days making. Then, inventors started building machines that could do these jobs much faster. One of the first important inventions was the spinning jenny invented by James Hargreaves in 1764. It allowed one worker to spin multiple threads at once. Soon after came Richard Arkwright's water frame. Then Edmund Cartwright invented the power loom. Together, these machines transformed the textile industry. Suddenly, clothing could be produced on a massive scale. Factories began replacing home workshops. Think about it this way. Imagine you're a baker who makes 10 cookies an hour, and suddenly your neighbor buys a machine that could make 1,000. You can still make cookies, but you're probably going out of business. That's what happened to many workers during the Industrial Revolution. Machines weren't just making life easier. They were changing the economy. But perhaps the most important invention of all was the steam engine. Early steam engines already existed, but in the late 1700s, Scottish inventor James Watt greatly improved them. This was a huge deal. Before steam engines, factories had to be built near rivers because they relied on water power. After steam engines, factories could be built almost anywhere. Steam engines also powered trains and ships. This revolutionized transportation. Goods could move farther, travel became faster, trade increased. The world suddenly felt smaller. It's hard to overstate how exciting this must have been. Imagine growing up your entire life traveling at the speed of a horse, and then suddenly seeing a machine pulling dozens of train cars faster than anything you've ever experienced. People at the time were amazed. Some were also terrified. As factories expanded, millions of people moved from rural areas into cities. This is called urbanization. Cities like Manchester grew incredibly fast. But there was a problem. The cities weren't prepared. Imagine millions of people suddenly moving into a city with no labor laws, no safety regulations, no building codes, no minimum wage. That's basically what happened. Workers often worked 12 to 16 hours a day. Factories were hot, dirty, and dangerous. Housing was overcrowded. Sanitation was poor. Disease spread easily. And one of the darkest parts of the Industrial Revolution was child labor. Children as young as 6 or 7 worked in factories and coal mines. Many worked long hours doing dangerous jobs because they could be paid less than adults. Imagine being in elementary school, except instead of math class, you're working underground in a coal mine for 12 hours. This was a reality for many children during this period. Eventually, workers began demanding change. They formed labor unions. They organized protests. They demanded safer conditions, higher wages, and shorter workdays. Governments slowly began passing laws. Child labor was restricted. Working conditions improved, and workers gained more rights. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just a story about machines. It was also a story about ordinary people fighting for better lives. The Industrial Revolution also changed society economically. A new middle class emerged. Factory owners, merchants, and entrepreneurs became wealthy. Capitalism expanded. Capitalism is an economic system where businesses are privately owned and individuals compete to make profits. Industrialization made many people richer, but it also caused huge inequalities. Some factory owners became incredibly wealthy. Meanwhile, many workers struggled to survive. This growing gap between rich and poor inspired criticism. One of the most famous critics was Karl Marx. Marx believed capitalism exploited workers and created conflict between social classes. His idea later influenced socialist and communist movements around the world. So yes, the Industrial Revolution eventually connects to topics like communism and even the Cold War. History loves to do that. Everything is connected. The Industrial Revolution eventually spread beyond Britain. It expanded into Belgium, France, Germany, and the United States. Industrialized countries became wealthier. They built stronger militaries. And they competed for resources in colonies around the world. Many historians believe industrialization helped fuel imperialism because powerful countries wanted more raw materials and more markets to sell their products. Of course, the Industrial Revolution wasn't entirely good. It caused a lot of pollution. Factories filled the air with smoke. Rivers became contaminated. Workers were often exploited. And economic inequality increased. But it also transformed the world. Mass production made goods cheaper. Transportation improved. Technology advanced. Living standards eventually increased, and the modern economy was born. In many ways, the world you live in today, the factories, the railroads, the city, the consumer goods, and the idea that technology can completely reshape society all have roots in the Industrial Revolution. If you're perhaps studying for a test, make sure to remember these key details. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain around 1760. It started because Britain had coal, iron, a large empire, investment capital, and an agricultural revolution. Important inventions included the spinning jenny, water frame, power loom, and James Watt's improvement of the steam engine. Industrialization led to urbanization, harsh factory conditions, and child labor. The Industrial Revolution transformed economies, transportation, politics, and society around the world. And that was the Industrial Revolution explained in under 10 minutes. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to 10-Minute Mentor for more quick lessons and big ideas, always explained in under 10 minutes. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.